Hi, this is National Master Dan Heisman, and we're here with another video to help you improve your chess game. We talk a lot about some of the main skills in chess, analysis, which contains calculation, stamina, time management. One of the skills we've talked about a couple times, but we haven't emphasized it greatly, but it's one of the most important skills in chess, is evaluation. And I hate to say it, but I played a game. I didn't play a game. I played in a game this week at our chess club. We played a consultation game. I'll explain that in a second. And we lost the game because our team evaluated a position wrong, and I was the captain of the team, so it's mainly my fault. But I'll show you what happened. But in any case, a consultation game is a game where multiple people get to talk to each other about what they want to do for their moves. So the way our club worked was we split the club in half. Half the people went in the other room. My half stayed in our room. And we would consult on a move for the game. We didn't have a lot of time. We did it after our club's business meeting, so it was a relatively quick time control. We had 45 minutes with a 10-second time delay. Now that may sound slow if you're used to playing 10-minute games, but if it's a consultation game and you have to talk on each move, we'd prefer more likely to have like 70 minutes than 45. 45 is not a lot of time to talk about things. So it was a relatively quick consultation game, but that's no excuse, as you'll see in the game. All right, so let's go through the game and show you how we ended up losing this game. I don't have the last few moves because we were in time pressure, but at the end of the game, you'll see that we're lost, even though I don't have the last couple moves. All right, so we were white, and we started with c4 here. I'll turn on the engine when we need it. The other team playing black decided to play symmetric English. We played g3, one of the main lines. The other main line would be to play knight c3. They played knight c6. We fianchettoed the bishop. And they decided to fianchetto 2, which is a symmetric line. We brought our knight to c3. They played bishop g7, perfectly symmetric. And now we had to decide, do we want to play the main line with knight f3, trying for e4, or maybe e3, knight ge2, and then d4? Or do we want to play maybe a Botvinnik system where we play e4 and d3? So we decided to play a Botvinnik system, and we played e4. And they played, I think they call it the Fischer defense, which is e6, which is a good idea. You can put your knight on e7, knight on g to e7, and then play d5. And that's a very solid defense. So we played knight ge2. They played knight ge7. We castled. They castled. We played d3. All right, let's turn on the engine here. We'll do add kibitzer. We'll turn on stockfish 15. All right, he'll be running next to the thing. And he says that black should now play d6 with equality. They played a move that I knew was not the best move. It's not terrible. They played knight d4. And now the idea when people play knight d4 is you take the knight. If they take with the pawn, then it blocks your d-pawn, which is actually kind of good. And then you play knight e2 and f4. If they take with the bishop, you play knight e2 anyway, threatening to win the bishop pair. If they move the bishop, you get a tempo. If they don't, you take the bishop and get the bishop pair. So already white is better after that move, and we played it correctly. We played knight takes d4. They thought for a while. They took with the pawn. The engine says that's the better way to take. Now the engine wants us to play knight to b5, threatening to play knight d6. Well, we didn't look a lot at that move because they could just play a move like d6, and then if we play bishop f4, they could play e5. So we didn't think that knight b5 was that good. The engine says it's actually pretty good. Let's see what the engine says. Let's make those moves. Knight b5 was not played in the game. If they play d6 to keep the knight out, engine says we should play queen to a4 with a big advantage. For instance, if they pin the knight, we should move the queen over and hit this pawn a second time. Didn't mean to do that. And they would have to take the knight to give us the bishop pair to save the pawn, and white's much better. Huh. How about that? Well, I learned something. All right, back to the game. So we played knight to e2. And the engine says that's not the right idea, and now black's perfectly okay. So they play d5. And again, the engine doesn't like that idea. It says we should trade pawns and play e takes d, c takes d, and then play either b3 or c5. We looked at c5 in this position, but we thought after queen c7, if we play b4, they play a5. So we didn't like that, and now the engine doesn't like that as much either. It thinks maybe we should just play b3. We played b3 immediately, but I can see now from looking at the engine's line that maybe this is better. Maybe we should just play, I shouldn't say maybe, the engine's way better than I am. I can see now that the engine's right. E takes d5, e takes d5. I didn't want to open up their bishop like that, but actually that's not bad for us. So we played something similar except for the fact that we played b3, but we didn't take the pawn first. So there it is, b3. That was our move. And the engine says, wrong idea, Dan, because now they can take your pawn first, and they do. So we're both not playing the most accurate moves. We should have taken the pawn. They should have played something other than their previous move. So okay, so bishop takes, and they play e5. We decided to just put the bishop back on g2. Now it says that black's better because his kingside majority is mobile and our queenside majority is a little slow. They play rook b8, and you could see that loses most of their advantage because they really don't need to play moves like b6 and bishop b7, but that was their plan. So we played b4, and the engine says they should play b5 and let us get a protected pass pawn with c5. They played b6. And we said, all right, let's go on the queen side. We debated for a while whether we wanted to play a4 first or queen b3 first. We played queen b3. Engine again doesn't like it, thinks that that's not the most accurate, thinks black should now play knight to f5, or maybe just rook to e8. They played bishop to b7. Again, black's a little better here. We played a4, and now black came up with the wrong plan. Black should just start playing on the king side where they have more pieces and my queen's on the queen side. That would give black the advantage. Instead, black decided to play with us on the queen side, and of course that's to our advantage. So they played bishop takes g2. They came up with the wrong plan, king takes, and now they play queen d7, which is okay. We play bishop to a3. And again, all the moves they should play here on the king side, they should play something like knight to f5. And go after our king, and black's way better. All right, so they want to play f5, and they're worried about our c5 discovered check. So they move the king, but that just kind of wastes time. They really don't have to worry about that. They play king h8, and now Stockfish says we should play b5 followed by maybe c5 with equality. We played rook a c1 first. Again, the engine is saying it's not the most accurate move order. So you can see we're not exactly playing like strong masters here. We're making a lot of second and third best moves where, you know, black's getting better and then we're getting back to equal and then we're finding the wrong plan. So not super high quality here by standards of figuring out what we should do. But again, they should clearly play on the king side here. And they do play f5. Engine says, you got the right idea, but maybe the wrong move. And again, we're close to equality if we play b5. And thank goodness for the first time in the last few moves, we do find the right move, b5. And now the engine says they should play f4 and continue their expansion. If they play f4, they're threatening f3 check. And the engine says, let's take a look at that. The only moves we would have to stop that would be either knight g1 or f3. We weren't sure which one was better. Since this wasn't played in the game, we never got a chance to really figure it out. Now that the engine's running, we can see it. They're actually both pretty close to equal. I think we were leaning slightly toward knight g1, which is, yeah, now they're both 0.00. So, yeah, we had the right idea here, but this was not played. That's what we thought they would do. Instead, they moved their rook, which was on the king side, over to the queen side. But that doesn't stop us from playing c5, and that means we've got to be a little bit better now. And the engine says, well, maybe you are, Dan, but really it's 0.00. You might be better. It might be more to your advantage to play on the queen side, but if he plays perfectly, you don't have any real advantage. So we played c5, and they have to take, and now we looked at both ways of taking. We thought the rook was better. The engine is saying it doesn't matter. We took with the rook, And now I looked at an interesting line. I looked at a line where he can sacrifice his queen and get the queen back. And I looked at bishop, rook takes rook, bishop takes, queen checks, but it hitting the king and hitting the bishop, but it doesn't work because after pawn takes, rook takes, I can just play bishop takes knight and win a piece. So even though it's a cute line, it doesn't work. Cute doesn't always equal good. So here, they take the rook, we take back with the bishop, and the engine says if they play perfectly, it should be even. They should play maybe f4 again, with the idea of keeping things on the king side. They make a big mistake here. They play a6. And they thought, oh, that pawn is pinned. We're hitting it 3 times with the pawn and the queen and the rook. And they missed our move completely, which I saw I even actually saw it on the previous move. I said, we were looking at the line and we said, what happens if they play a6? And I said, well, we can't play b6 because they play queen c6 check. But maybe we could just play queen to f7 and hit their knight. And if they play queen d5 check to trade queens, we just trade queens, and then we take the a6 pawn, and that pawn's ready to go to a7, and we're up a pawn and with a dangerous pawn on the 6th rank. And if they don't play queen to d5 check, then they have to guard the knight, and they can't do it any other way. So let's take a look. Queen f7. Let's look at all the ways they can save the knight. If they play bishop to f8, to guard the knight with the bishop, then I have queen f6 check, and if they move the king, I can take the pawn on e5, or I could even bring the knight up, but taking the pawn on e5 looks good. So bishop f8, queen f6 check, king g8, bishop, queen takes e5. If they try to repeat the position after bishop f8, queen f6 check, and play bishop g7, then of course we win the knight with queen takes e7. What if they play rook to e8? Well, if they play rook to e8, then we can just simply take the pawn on a6, and they're all tied up. And again, they could check us with queen d5 check, but that pawn on a6 is really dangerous. So they would just be losing that pawn, and we would get a dangerous passed pawn. So and the last line they could do is play queen to b7 check first, and then we would play probably f3 again. Maybe let's see which line the computer likes. Yeah, the computer says f3 is better than king g1. And again, the knight is hanging. And now, if they move the knight to d5, again, I could trade queens and just take the pawn on a6 and hit the rook. And, well, let's take a look at that. Knight to d5, queen takes b7, rook takes b7, pawn takes. And now if they knight check and fork our king and our rook, we just move our king over. And if they take our rook, knight takes f1, we play a takes b7. And if they play a move like rook to b7, I can just ignore them and play a7 and threaten to get a queen. And if they want to take our rook on f1, they can. And white's just winning easily. So we saw these lines. We said, oh, well, this is all really good. And at this point, we're ahead on time also. So you can see the evaluation is we're up by 2.6. And they don't have anything they can really do. So they actually played the best move, even though it completely loses, and we knew that it lost. They play a takes b5 and say, we'll give you the knight, we'll take the 2 pawns, we'll have a queenside passed pawn, we'll have a kingside majority, we've got lots of threats, but you're up a piece. And we said, okay, we can't take with the bishop because then it's pinned to our queen. So we have to take with the queen, and we did. And then they checked us first. The engine says, they could trade queens here first, but it doesn't really matter. They checked us. Now we thought for a while about whether king g1 or f3 was better. The engine says f3 is slightly better, but we're talking 3.3 versus 3.29 here. So it almost makes no difference, but of course during the game we didn't know that. So we played king to g1, and they took our pawn. And now we're reaching the crucial moments of the game, really. Up to now, black had, we had an equal opening. Black had a little bit better in the early middle game. Then black went wrong and let us play that queen f7 move, and now we're completely winning. And now the question is, what's the right technique? And here is where I really failed. We were getting down in time to about I think we had maybe less than 8 minutes and they had maybe 5 minutes left, or maybe even less. So it was about 8-5 at this point. And we thought, all right, we have an extra piece. Their bishop on g7 is not helping their pawns yet too much. We could just bring our rook over and get it in the game, but if we trade queens and just move our rook over or move our knight over, we should be able to block that a-pawn, and then we should be able to slowly make progress, because the best they can do is play e4 and maybe get one more passed pawn, but we have an extra piece in the area and we should be winning. So we analyzed the position correctly. We said if we play queen d6, he probably has to trade queens. What we didn't do is evaluate it correctly. We evaluated that if we play queen to d6 and they trade queens and then they play rook to b2 and hit our knight, we could put the knight on c1 and guard our d-pawn, and our bishop would stop them from playing a3. And we said it'll take a couple moves to consolidate, but we're probably just still winning. That evaluation was completely wrong. And that's one of the main reasons I made this video, because even though we analyzed the position correctly, and we had analyzed up to here very nicely to win the piece for the 2 pawns, it's certainly not an easy win. But it turns out it's a much, much easier win with the queens on the board. Their king is a little bit exposed. Our queen in the middle of the board can do some damage. We can get our rook in the game right away with a move like rook to c1. The engine says we should play bishop d6, forking the rook and the e-pawn, which does not win the e-pawn. We were a little worried about moves like that, because if we play bishop d6, you know, at some point they might be able to penetrate with the rook. Now on bishop d6 right away, they can't penetrate with the rook to b2, because we have probably a queen check. Well, not really. I guess if we queen check, they can put the queen in the way, and maybe we're not making progress. But because they could play queen back to g8 and things like that, we really didn't discuss this position for a long time, and yet it's the crucial thing that happened in the whole game. We talked about it. I had another player on my team who was rated 1900 that we were talking. And we said, yeah, let's just trade queens. This endgame should be winning. And, you know, we really didn't think that this was going to be the critical move of the game. And even after the game, when we lost the game, I didn't think we lost it because of this move. I thought we lost it later. Well, technically we did. I mean, after this move, we dropped from completely winning down to about even. But you could see we're up 3.67, which is a gigantic lead. And all we have to do is keep the queens on the board. Any reasonable move that keeps the queens on the board is winning. Now watch what happens to that evaluation when we force the trade of queens. Watch how much we lost. It's just amazing. I had no idea until I looked at the engine after the game how bad this move was. We played queen d6, and look at that. It jumped from 3.7 down, and the deeper it looks, the more it likes black now. It was down to 0.5, and now it's down to 0.3. So it's saying that he should trade queens, and now all of a sudden black is theoretically at least drawing the game. The problem from our point of view is it's not just that black's theoretically drawing the game, which is bad enough that we were winning and now we're drawing. But the problem is that it's much, much easier for black to play this position than it is for us. And we're both low on time, and we need the time to think about how to do things. And their things are all very natural. The moves they can play don't take a lot of time. So from a psychological standpoint, it's also a blunder. We not only evaluate the position wrong, but psychologically it becomes very, very tough for us to play. And that we didn't anticipate. So we saw what was going to happen. We just didn't evaluate it as being so disastrous. So they, of course, trade queens. We take, and now they're back ranked. They don't have to worry about it at all. So they bring their rook down and attack our knight. Well, we don't have a lot of places to go to save the knight. If we play rook to e1, they can just play a move like rook to d2 and win our d-pawn and get a third pawn for the piece. And then we're in real trouble because those pawns can really run against us. I guess, yeah, see, I guess we could play rook e1, rook d2, and then king f1, and if rook takes d3, I can play rook a1. And they have connected pawns in the center, and we're winning the a-pawn, and we're trading their a-pawn for our d-pawn. We didn't really want to do that, but it turns out something like that might save the game for us. But we were still thinking about winning the game. Again, we're evaluating the position wrong. We're evaluating this position as white's better, when in fact it's pretty even. White has, if anything, a microscopic advantage if he plays perfectly, but playing perfectly is not so easy. So we brought the rook to c1 first, which is okay, threatening the back rank check. And they play h5, which is actually a big mistake. They should just play king g8 and get the king to the center with king f7. When they play check, the engine says if we now find the right move, we could check first and then move our king, or we could just move the king. We thought that checking first and potentially putting the bishop in a pin was better than just playing king to f1 and guarding the knight. So we thought we were gaining a time to do that. The engine says it's exactly the opposite. The engine says leave your rook on the first rank where you can guard your d pawn and you can stop the a pawn, and simply play king f1, and all of a sudden white's got a lot of his advantage back because black's last move wasn't accurate. But we thought just the opposite. So again, we're analyzing okay, we're just not evaluating very well. So we play check, and of course he has to play king h7, and now we need to play king f1 to guard the knight, and now we need to just give them trade the d pawn for the a pawn and we can get a draw. But we thought if we held the d pawn that maybe we would be better, but that was an erroneous evaluation. We should actually just play king to f1, and if they want to go after the d3 pawn with rook to d2, we should just let them. We thought we needed to guard d3, so we played it the wrong idea. We played knight to c1. And now all our pieces are kind of tied up with each other. And not only that, the knight on c1 can be attacked by the bishop on h6, if the bishop on g7 moves to h6. So they play rook b1, pinning the knight, and the engine says we should play h4. We didn't strongly look at h4. By now we're down to like, I don't know, 4 minutes. And we didn't strongly look at h4. We just said, well, let's get out of the pin so the knight can move to a2 or e2 if he has to. So we played king g2, and again we're equal. And here he played e4, which the engine says is not their best move, but again good enough to draw. And again our best move is h4. Our second best move is bishop f4, keeping that bishop out of h6. Here we thought we should maybe pin the bishop. And in fact, I might even have the notation wrong. It's possible we did pin the bishop with rook c7, and then when he moved out of the pin, we repeated. It's possible here we played rook check, rook here, king here, rook here, king here, and then rook here to get to this position. I don't have it in my notes here. I have it that we just went back to c2 right away, but it basically creates the same position. I think somebody at the club has the actual order that we played it in, but we played rook to c2 here, and that's not a good move. After the game I said I didn't like rook c2, but the engine still says with perfect play we're drawing. They played bishop h6, and now we didn't like bishop a3 because of rook to a1. We looked at this move, we looked at bishop a3, rook to a1, bishop to b2, and now rook to b1, and all our pieces are tied up with each other. But that's okay. We can just play bishop a3 and bishop back to b2, and maybe we can get a draw here. But we were still thinking that, oh, this is bad. We're tying down all our pieces. But actually, it's our last chance. So instead, we said, well, we can block the bishop with our bishop. And now we're down under 3 minutes. And we had a rule in the consultation game that when you get down under 3 minutes, the two top players on each team can go sit on the main board. You know, normally you don't sit close to the other team while you're consulting, so everybody can consult and talk to each other without the other team hearing you. But when it gets down to where there's less than 3 minutes left, everybody crowds around the board with the clock. So we play bishop f4, which just loses. And you could see the engine is like, oh, at first he was like minus 0.5. Now he's like minus 1.1. They happily grabbed our bishop right away. We took back, and they just pushed the pawn. And now the engine's like, sorry, Dan, everything you do is losing. We threw in a check, which is actually bad. The best move here is king to g3, which is not easy to find. And I guess on king g3... let's see what could happen. Let's take a look at king g3, new variation. They say that black should play king g7. We're all tied up. We don't have anything to do. h3. All our pieces are blocked. Rook to b2. Rook to c4. At some point, we're probably going to have to give him a piece. They say repeat the position with rook b1, rook c2, and now king h7. I wonder how he's making progress here. Maybe by putting white into zugzwang. f3, e3. Wow, that pawn looks dangerous. Knight e2. And it says black's way better, but maybe not winning. It's got 0.8. But boy, with our clock falling, this would have been hard to find, hard to play. All right, so we blundered. I blundered. We played rook c7 check. Now they should play king h6, and it's a complete win. I don't think they did play king h6. They might have. I think they zigzagged their king toward our rook. And meanwhile, they're threatening to get another passed pawn. They're threatening to play rook b2 and push the a pawn. They've got lots of threats. And eventually, I think we might have played knight e2 and knight takes d4, which doesn't work at all. And they threatened to get a queen, and we couldn't stop them, and we ended up losing. But it all came down to where we were winning. We played this really, really nice move, queen to f7, which I was very proud of. We played that move. They realized they were in trouble. They played a reasonable defense. They played a takes b5 and just gave us the piece. We took the piece. They took the pawn. And here it is, the key position in the game. We evaluated queen d6 as helping us to try to win the game, when in fact it's just the opposite. After queen d6, we might have been a little bit better, but it was not easy to play, and we messed it all up. If we just keep the queens on the board and get our rook into the game here, we're actually doing pretty well. Let's take a look at that for a second. Let's say we play rook c1. If they play queen f3, then we would counterattack their rook with something like bishop d6 and the back ranks getting weak. What else could they do? They can give themselves some luft with h5 or h6. Engine says just block the pawn and get out of the way of the rook. Rook can hit the queen. Keep the queens on the board. King to h7. Rook to c6 to hit that g6 pawn over there. I always want to draw lines as if ChessBase is going to let me, but I'm using ChessBase this time and not one of the servers where it lets me draw arrows. And it says now they have to play queen f7. Now we can trade. Queen takes, rook takes, because the rook's not threatening to penetrate. And now we could play rook c4, and if they try to guard the pawn, now we could just play h4. We can even better, we could bring our king to the middle. This is the kind of position we were hoping to get to, of course. King to f1 looks like my kind of move. And it says black has no real play here, and white's just up a piece for 2 pawns, and now it's much, much different than the game. In the game, after they traded queens, those pawns were dangerous, as you saw. In this position, the pawns aren't very dangerous at all. They're going nowhere, and his rook's tied up, and we're just winning. This is not that hard. If I could get a position like this, we could pretty much win every time without too much trouble. Oh well. So that's how we lost the game. We evaluated wrong. I evaluated wrong. My teammates thought it was a good idea too. Yeah, let's trade queens. We're up a piece for 2 pawns. Normally, that's what you do. By the way, the rule is when you're way ahead, you want to make fair trades of pieces, not necessarily pawns. Sometimes you want to trade pawns, sometimes you don't. But when you're only a little ahead, a piece for 2 pawns is a fair amount ahead, but it's not way ahead. It's significant. Certainly, the engine said the number was significant. But in terms of material, it's not significant. A piece for 2 pawns is usually enough to win the game. But they had some things going for them, and by trading queens, we made those things going for them worse. So usually, more times than not, you'd want to trade queens when you're up a piece for 2 pawns, but not always. And there's certainly quite a few exceptions, and this game was a big exception. So much so that, as I said, when I went over the game afterwards with the computer, it surprised me when it dropped the evaluation that much on the trade of queens. All right, hopefully you enjoyed this game, and maybe you learned a little bit too, and play a little better next time. Please tell your friends about our channel, Dan Heisman Chess. If you liked the video, you can like it. You can subscribe to the channel. We'll see you next time. Bye.